Hey everyone, Crisis here. Today, I'm making good on a promise. I will be power scaling Darth Vader from the Star Wars Expanded Universe. That being the majority of Star Wars media published before Disney's acquisition of the Star Wars franchise in 2012. Before we get into that though, please be kind enough to subscribe if you appreciate the sort of content I've been putting out thus far. And if you're new here, please consider leaving a like on the video and commenting down below. It really does help out the channel and allows my videos to reach a wider audience. Thank you. To further clarify, I will not be considering any sources published by Disney or Lucasfilm released after 2014 that aren't explicitly Legends material, as a few pieces of fiction, like the latest Star Wars The Old Republic expansion or the Strange Encounters novella, are recently released Legends material. With that said, let's begin with Vader's attack potency. For the attack potency and durability of the Dark Lord of the Sith, we'll work our way up from some of his least to most impressive feats and scaling, as I do for each of my power scaling videos. Of course, scans with sources will be shown on screen, and any calculations used can be found in the description. But before we can get into that, we have to lay the groundwork for both the in-universe scaling as well as the basic means of determining the strength level of Star Wars characters as a whole. It's been thoroughly established through pretty much every medium of Star Wars content that Force users use the Force to amplify their statistics in combat, meaning their physically amped strength and durability would scale to feats performed using the Force, such as telekinesis or Force push. This would as well mean that saber combat would typically scale the respective fighters' feats to one another, as their Force amplified stats would be applied in saber combat. To provide a fairly digestible example, Anakin telekinetically moves a separatist battleship with small city levels of kinetic energy. He then battles Count Dooku some months later, with the two of them trading blows, surely amped by the Force, meaning that Anakin packs at least 2.5 megatons of power behind his saber swings, and Dooku is able to block and parry these strikes, meaning he can output and withstand at least relative amounts of kinetic energy. So essentially, Force users should be as physically strong and durable as the feats they perform with the Force. With that being said, we're onto a subject surely more controversial than the last. I'm of the opinion that Darth Vader far exceeds the level of power he once had access to during his days as a Jedi Knight. This topic has been debated extensively anywhere from Comic Vine, YouTube comments, or Omegle. And from these debates, numerous arguments and counter-arguments have been formed regarding every avenue surrounding the subject. But I can only cover so much in a YouTube video. If you'd like to voice chat debate me or any one of my friends on Discord who assist me in these videos, a link to my server will be in the description. Now, to talk about the elephant in the room, George Lucas. The scribe of Star Wars once said in a Vanity Fair interview, and I quote, "Anakin, as Skywalker, as a human being, was going to be extremely powerful, but he ended up losing his legs and an arm and became partly a robot. So a lot of his ability to use the Force, a lot of his powers are curbed at this point because as a living form, there's not much of him left. So his ability to be twice as good as the Emperor disappeared, and now maybe he's 20% less than him." This is the go-to author's statement I've witnessed when it comes to Vader downplay. Statements like these, along with the generally accepted logic that any statement made by Lucas would fall under G-canon, or the highest form of continuity on the Star Wars EU canonicity totem pole, therefore superseding any lower source in the case of a contradiction. What proponents of these types of arguments fail to realize is threefold. Number 1. Death of the Author is an argument devised by French literary philosopher Roland Barthes in 1967. Essentially, media, once produced, is designed to be interpreted by the reader and not the author. The meaning of a piece of text, for example, is not inherently bound and thus definitively decided by the writer of that text. Media, such as a book, is designed to be interpreted. Thus, after the ideas of the creator leave their hands and arrive in ours, it is up to us to determine the quote-unquote truth behind it. Number 2. Officially, the sources that were considered to be more canon than the others were decided based on a list of factors, with continuity manager Leland Shee stating that when it came to determining between two contradictory sources which were canon, that it was case by case, with factors such as consistency and popularity being determining factors in the decision-making process. Shee even publicly clarified that a source from the EU could overwrite a G-canon source, and you don't have to look very far to find examples of the EU favoring non-G-canon sources over G-level material. Han and Leia Solo, Luke and the Emperor, these examples and the actual words of Lucasfilm officials firmly place the job of interpreting the Star Wars universe on the fans, as well as the actual EU itself, not George Lucas, or, as Death of the Author posits, any one author. With that out of the way, my belief of Vader scaling above Anakin Skywalker in power comes from consistent, numerous, implicit and explicit statements, such as Vader finding a renewed sense of power almost immediately after Revenge of the Sith, stated to have nothing to do with his armor, as well as statements of Vader growing in power since his days as a Jedi and being stated stronger than ever multiple times until his peak in Return of the Jedi. Also, to Lucas's point of Vader losing potential due to his injuries, both Sidious and the Dark Lady Lumaya, an understudy of Vader and Sidious, believe that the power of the dark side relies more on will than the flesh, with the Star Wars Complete Encyclopedia stating, "Perception was as much a component as the midi-chlorians were, and any beings who believed that they could be powerful could be trained to do so," with Sidious citing Vader's actual weakness as a matter of psychology rather than physicality, and that he would do everything in his power to re-establish Vader as the most burgeoning Force user in the galaxy. So there is no reason to automatically discard the notion of Vader surpassing Anakin if supplied with sufficient evidence. And yes, before anyone asks, Vader was conflicted and thus weakened during the Battle of Endor, despite Vader's own words on the subject. In any scenario other than fighting his own son, Vader's at his strongest at this point. Also, Luke Skywalker's no slouch, and if you'd like a video later down the line regarding how godly Luke is in the EU, leave a comment. To help determine how powerful Vader is, let's examine Anakin Skywalker's power. Anakin Skywalker at his peak, aside from any outside amps such as oneness or force nexuses, is the strongest prequel-era character. With his newfound dark side power, he is stronger than Yoda and Mace Windu, two characters competing for the title of strongest Jedi in history at the point of the Clone War, both characters who could contend with / best Revenge of the Sith Darth Sidious. And for all of the Obi-Wan stans who would argue that the Negotiator scales to this, no. Anakin was expressingly nerfed, both in force aptitude due to his confliction, and in skill to his mental state. So, via this scaling, Darth Vader would upscale from all of the Jedi and Sith of old, but rather than listing off essentially every feat and statement attributed to almost all of Star Wars, let's look at the most impressive of these, which Vader at his peak would scale to. Count Dooku, a character with consistent scaling to the top tiers of the prequel-era Jedi, was stated numerous times throughout the Revenge of the Sith novelization to possess universal levels of aptitude with the Force. These levels of power are consistent, seeing as Yoda, a being who Dooku outright scales to in the expanded universe, is weaker than, but relative to, Darth Sidious, with both masters of the light and darkness being viewed as avatars for their respective sides of the Force, with each of them touting statements of supremacy above all other practitioners of the Force in history, and their battle in Revenge of the Sith being described as the expression of the fundamental conflict of the universe itself. While Dooku is demonstrably less powerful than Yoda or Sidious, his relativity to characters of such stature enforce his scaling to universal levels. To clarify, this is Dooku's attack potency, not destructive capacity. The difference being the raw strength of a lightsaber strike in this instance, rather than the actual range of said attack. So, I'm not saying Dooku could outstretch his hand and crush the entire universe. I'm saying that the energy produced in his saber strikes and telekinetic blows are relative to energy that a universe-busting attack would produce. Most people seeking to downplay Anakin's defeat over Dooku reference a number of factors, such as Anakin's Form 5 acting as a counter to Dooku's Form 2, or Dooku's age and inferior stamina in comparison to the 22-year-old Chosen One. However, I find both of these counter-arguments irrelevant to the point of Anakin outclassing Darth Tyrannus in force power. To the point of Dooku's stamina, both the adult and junior novelizations of Revenge of the Sith make a point to say Anakin could not win a war of attrition against a Dark Lord who was shown being able to rejuvenate himself through the Force multiple times throughout their battle aboard the Invisible Hand. And to the point of raw power, the same aforementioned novel as well states blatantly that the Count could not match Anakin blow for blow. Even prior to reaching his peak scene in Revenge of the Sith, Anakin could already overpower and launch Dooku with physical strikes. The same Dooku who was instructed by Sidious to genuinely make an attempt at Anakin's life, per Clone Wars writer and director Dave Filoni.
And that's always another thing that's been discussed. I mean, Palpatine isn't protecting Anakin ever. He's trying to see how powerful is he. And this is kind of a little litmus test. And George said that, Sidious would do this more than once. There's not just the one kidnapping of the Chancellor that...
Again, even in the Revenge of the Sith novel itself, it states Dooku finds Anakin inherently abominable due to his cybernetic prosthesis, and after seeing him as a very real threat, he decides his own life is more valuable to Sidious's overall plan than Anakin's. So Skywalker defeated a going all out, rejuvenated, and desperate to survive Count Dooku. Darth Vader as well scales to Darth Sidious, both above his prequel era self via upscaling from Revenge of the Sith Anakin, and to his Return of the Jedi variant through statements made by Sidious after his death over Endor during the Dark Empire era, with Sidious stating, "Yes, Vader remained strong in the Force, but strong enough to succeed me? Never. Granted, he was strong enough to kill me, but that only lasted for so long." Allow me to break this quote down for those who may be a bit confused by Sidious's choice of words here. He frames the following statement around Force strength, attributing Vader's actual power to his own death. His denial of Vader's potential as a successor would be in reference to Sidious's coveted knowledge of immortality, that being essence transfer. Essentially, Sidious is stating, sure, Vader was powerful enough to beat me, but I know how to live forever and he does it. It is also worth stating that the Vader with which Palpatine is attributing this feat to was stated to be weaker than he had ever been and on the verge of death before sustaining the full power of Sidious's lightning. Emperor Palpatine being stated in a number of sources to be able to create Force storms during the original trilogy era, perhaps as early as just after Order 66. Palpatine's declaration regarding his creation of Force storms can be found within the Book of Anger. Excerpts from said book, stated to be incomplete, were found to be written approximately a year after the events of Revenge of the Sith by Grand Master Luke Skywalker. It is as well stated both in the Star Wars Complete Encyclopedia as well as the Wizards of the Coast website that the Darkside acolyte Jarek was privy to the Darkside Compendium before having his access to it revoked by Sidious out of fear. The Darkside Compendium being the collection of Darkside lore books written and collected by Sidious, featuring the Book of Anger. It is as well stated in the Dark Empire endnotes themselves that it was many years prior to the events of Dark Empire when Sidious first claimed to create a Force storm. Now, why is this impressive? Well, Force storms are described as wormholes torn into hyperspace, and hyperspace, as its name would suggest, is a higher dimensional plane. But it doesn't stop there. In the novel Death Star, it is stated that hyperspace is composed of more than the 3 spatial and 4th temporal dimensions, so it is greater than width, height, and length as well as time. To attempt to briefly explain what having higher dimensional power would mean in the case of Vader, allow me to run down exactly what a spatial dimension is. What the Young Scientist Journal describes is thus: the second dimension, being length and width, consists of an infinite layer of one-dimensional space. The third dimension we inhabit is made up of an infinite layer of 2D space, and so on. To further exemplify this, a line or a one-dimensional object can extend out to infinity, but could never gain the depth of a two-dimensional object, meaning there is a greater than infinite gap between dimensions. So, hyperspace being 5D is composed of an infinite layer of 3D and 4D space, having two infinite layers greater than the contemporary universe. To put this in power scaling terms, the attack potency of a 5th dimensional attack is infinitely greater than any attack on a 3rd dimensional scale, so destroying, say, an infinite number of 3D universes. This is infinitely weaker than a 4D attack, which is infinitely weaker than a 5D attack. However, creating a hole in something doesn't necessarily scale you to whatever is on the other side. It'd be like cutting a hole in a dam, letting the titanic amount of water running loose. The actual act of creating the tear would in no way scale to the tons of water that would then come rushing through. No, the key to scaling characters to this higher dimensionality is twofold: Sidious's actual control over the energies of hyperspace, as well as his raw dark side energy empowering the destructive nature of the Force Storms. The timeline of Sidious's growing control over this chaotic expression of destructive power is thus: shortly after Revenge of the Sith, he's aware of the technique's intricacies and notes it may take decades to master. Almost immediately after his death, he is stated to rend space itself, to travel galactic distances as a Sith spirit. This verbiage and utility being consistent with the use of Force Storms. Sometime after Vader's death, a clone Palpatine writes that he lacks a perfect control over the technique, and years after this into Dark Empire, both he himself, as well as an omniscient guidebook, asserts he finally has achieved dominion over Force Storms. So, how does this all tie back to Vader? Well, it is stated in the Star Wars Fact File 120 that it took many years for the Sith Lord to regain his powers after his death over Endor. So, Sidious, weaker than his Return of the Jedi self, managed to gain greater control over these 5th dimensional energies. As expressed in Dark Empire itself, the potency of these higher dimensional disturbances are tied directly to Sidious's rage/anger, and by that, his dark side power. The connection between Palpatine's raw dark side strength and the control over Force Storms is further strengthened, seeing as once Luke and Leia cut Palpatine off from his dark side empowering emotions, he can no longer control his attack, made most devastating through his unleashed rage. To summarize, Sidious, both during and after his initial death, can use his raw dark side power to manipulate the 5th dimensional energy of Force Storms. This Sidious, via statements, would be weaker than his Return of the Jedi era self, and then a battle-damaged / near-death Vader is stated to possess the Force strength to kill Sidious at the point of Return of the Jedi. Again, I'm not saying that Vader can stretch out his hand and crush the entirety of the 5th dimension with the Force. I'm only scaling the amount of kinetic energy with which Vader would be packing behind his saber swings and Force attacks to these 5th dimensional levels. Remember, I'm talking about the actual force of an attack, not the area of effect of the attack. The consistency for the Force itself scaling to at least 4th dimensional is plentiful, with the aforementioned novel Death Star stating that while murmurs of average-minded individuals losing sanity through prolonged exposure to hyperspace, Vader instead found comfort in the experience. as well as numerous examples such as Tales of the Jedi or Knights of the Old Republic, stating both the Force as well as hyperspace exist on a higher plane. Vader's reaction and attack speed is soundly in the light speed ranges, via upscaling from a feat performed by Clone Wars era Obi-Wan, clocking in at 7.5% the speed of light, and as well reacting to a number of blaster bolts at nearly point-blank range, in addition to deflecting oncoming blaster fire from all sides. Blasters, of course, being consistently stated to move at the speed of light. Vader, further upscaling from Anakin, would possess reaction speeds thousands of times faster than light, through Anakin's feat of reacting to hyperspace travel, stopping a cruiser at a specific point in space free-handed. And before someone types this response at comparable speeds, yes, Anakin was seemingly amped by Obi-Wan Kenobi and Mace Windu. However, I don't find this a very valid reason to not attribute this feat to at least peak Vader. Obi-Wan, as a character, is already far less powerful than Anakin Skywalker by Revenge of the Sith, via Dooku ragdolling Obi, and Anakin being definitively more powerful than Dooku in their fight in Revenge of the Sith. And as for Mace Windu, Nick Rostu, a Force-sensitive mercenary turned enemy of the Empire, stated that Darth Vader, only a year after his fall to the dark side, was a far more powerful being than Car Vastor. Car Vastor being a character that was stated to outclass the Jedi Master Mace Windu in strength, speed, and overall power. So, it's safe to say that by the time of Return of the Jedi, an amplification to Vader's speed via Windu would be a drop in the bucket, and that this feat, which has been calced at a low end to be 3,000 times the speed of light, would soundly apply to Vader. Darth Vader stands as the culmination of saber combat, refined through a combination of training by some of the finest Jedi and Sith teachers in galactic history, as well as being tempered through a lifetime of combat and warfare. Even prior to Vader's Sith training, he was regarded by Darth Sidious as the most skilled Sith Lord in history, placing his dueling prowess above the likes of Darth Tyrannus and Darth Maul, with Maul possessing statements of unparalleled skill during the Phantom Menace era. Dooku obviously being able to combat against fellow top-tier prequel-era duelists, Yoda and Mace Windu. Two duelists as well having mastery of most, if not all, of the 7 saber forms. Windu specifically being the foremost practitioner of Vapad, a style requiring the highest level of skill over the 7 lightsaber styles. As of the Galactic Civil War, Vader is a master of the 7 lightsaber forms and stands as a paragon of dueling via his ability to switch between styles on the fly. His dueling prowess scales above Old Ben, as well as every other being in the galaxy in the years prior to A New Hope. Old Ben being stated to have maintained his Jedi training while in desert isolation, with the Clone Wars era Obi-Wan being able to easily deflect saber strikes from Dooku, strikes bearing the intent to kill. So essentially, even among masters of all varieties of saber combat, Darth Vader still stands in his own realm, and for those who claim Vader's cybernetics would have hindered his skills, his previously mentioned feats against Old Ben, a character stated to have equal skill to the Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker, as well as his acrobatic flourishes seen only a few months after his loss of limbs, shows that Vader is entirely capable of recreating feats of swordsmanship on the level of his old self. Star Wars might be one of the most hacks verses in fiction, so I'm sure I'll miss a few abilities belonging to the Dark Lord, but these are the ones that I've found over the course of my research. Of course, Vader is able in all standard Force abilities, such as telekinesis, telepathy, precognition, Force repulse, and Force augmentation, with powers such as Force choke, targeting internal organs. Being a Force user, he can as well draw on his vast reserves of rage to enhance his statistics during a battle. He has shield creation, which can deflect blaster fire, lightning projection, either in the form of emerald lightning or whatever this is, energy absorption / redirection in the form of Tudiminis, shown working on laser fire and force lightning. Combustion, the ability to overload an object with energy to the point where it explodes, in this case a kyber crystal. Vaporization, atomic manipulation through the art of the small, shown to cure toxins at an atomic level. Beast control, the ability to verbally weaken an opponent's will through Dune Mach. He can telepathically pry into your mind for your insecurities, make you feel fear, amp and heal himself through feeding on these dark side emotions. Force stun to overload one's senses, rendering them immobilized, Vader himself being resistant to this ability. Sedation through the Force, with his Force abilities as well empowering his skills, with his ability to read his opponent's emotions mid-battle, as well as his precognition, giving him an edge in combat. Force sever, or having the Force removed from his very being, and through the filtration systems of his helmet, he can resist necrotic viruses that were even able to put Sidious into a life-threatening state. What I've just listed are only the hacks and abilities confirmed to be accessible to Vader, either through feats or statements. However, Vader's potential skill set very well could dwarf this list, seeing as Vader had access to not only information granted to him during his time as a Jedi, such as the Jedi Path, or everything passed on to him by Obi-Wan Kenobi, but also knowledge granted to him by Sidious, who, during his training, had studied all aspects of the Force, Jedi, and Sith traditions. With Palpatine, the most knowledgeable Sith in the Rule of Two, as his master, Vader would be recognized as a master of the dark side by his teacher after embracing these dark arts. As well, Vader, during the Imperial rule of Coruscant, had access to the Jedi Archives, a repository of near endless knowledge from around the galaxy, as well as the only Sith holocrons known to the Jedi of the Old Republic, with only a single holocron being designed to store near infinite knowledge. As Vader was Palpatine's most favored and trusted acolyte prior to his rise to the light side, his access to techniques such as Sith sorcery would logically be second only to Sidious himself. So, in short, Vader had access to one of the largest collections of Force-related knowledge in galactic history, through Darth Sidious and the skill garnered through the Rule of Two and the Jedi Archives and Sith holocrons. Meaning, I'm going to have to take a page out of the Star Wars trilogy sourcebook and say, Vader is believed that he had access to many other powers than what's been listed. So, with all things said, Darth Vader from the Star Wars expanded universe has 5th dimensional attack potency, massively faster than light combat and reaction speed, top tier master level saber skill, as well as a plethora of hacks and knowledge to give most potential opponents a run for their money. I know I covered a wide range of topics in this video, and I sincerely hope I was able to adequately present these concepts, but if you still disagree with any of my reasoning or conclusions in this video, I'm more than open to discussing the various topics found within this video at length in my Discord server linked in the description. I'd also appreciate a follow on Twitter, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. Thanks for watching, I'll see you guys next time.